I have an editor. He edits whatever we want out, so everything's safe.
I think he should make sure that's in it.
I'm having a little red wine. Can he edit this?
Oh, gosh.
See, that's the way to do it.
That makes me nauseous just looking at it right now.
Did you have quite a weekend?
Ooh.
Yeah, I was just telling Xander, I went to a music festival, so I'm a little beat.
That's masochism, though. One feels like, what did I just do to myself?
It really is.
Welcome to Bye Bitches podcast. Today, we're doing something special. In fact, I'm going to call this today, I'm calling it the bitchin' biz, because we are actually in a business that's pretty bitchin', but we're kind of bitching about it. And if I'm using the word a couple different ways. Mm-hmm. So today, look, our podcast is about movies, TV, and people we love. And we're going to have to stick with kind of the latter, which is people we love, because we have just entered the SAG strike. And our podcast, being that it's a rewatch podcast, and we talk about all these iconic films and TV, I think pretty much everything I've done and most of our guests have done are basically produced from struck companies, the AMPTP. And SAG has informed us that they would not like us to discuss those kinds of shows and productions that would, I guess, directly or indirectly support those companies. However,
so you'll have to imagine some sort of a spy genre in one form or another,
it's
on one
be a
network
game.
or another.
Right.
It's going to be a game. You're going to have to figure out what we're talking about. Use your detective skills and deduce.
Google. Yeah. Pull up IMDb. But before I go any further and introduce our guest, I do want to say that SAG fully 100% supports us promoting ourselves as artists. And we can talk about our careers and everything. We're just not supposed to mention the titles. Therefore, our guest that we're so excited for is somebody who's been at the top of my list from the very beginning, not only because he is an insanely talented actor and artist, but he also is a fascinating storyteller, wordsmith, veteran thespian, and friend. And as of today, Xander Berkeley has an astonishing 255 actor credits. Did you know that, Xander?
Wow.
I check in every once in a while.
He began his on-screen career in 1981 in a movie with Faye Dunaway. And then, because originally my whole introduction, of course, names the titles of these things, but he went on to roles in movies about a punk rocker, and there was a movie with Tom Cruise and a movie with Tom Hanks and Harrison Ford, and that's just to name a few. And of course, he has a huge resume of television as well. So this is when you have to go to IMDb. Everyone, please welcome Xander Berkeley.
Hi, everybody.
Well, the last time CG you saw Xander probably was at her wedding.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because we moved not long after that.
Right, and I did too. 2 years later to Chicago. So
you look exactly the same.
That's what everyone says.
Really?
The night before my 21st birthday, my mom goes, you don't look a day over 16. Like, that's what every 21-year-old wants to hear.
Oh, soon enough you will.
Well, so Xander, let's start off with just like, how are you? How you doing? How's the family? How's the East Coast? You now live in Maine full time, correct?
We do, and we're sort of building a little environment to lure friends like yourselves into the bliss of nature to make independent movies. We're trying to get competitive tax incentives brought to the state of Maine, and things are looking very good on that front.
Yeah.
And we're developing property that would be cinematic and a fun place for everybody to come and stay. We're looking forward to collaborating with writers and actors and friends. And I think it's worth in this little interview to discuss, the elephant in the room is the strike. And we can talk about it. I think my sense is a lot of people are curious to know what it's all about. And, I've even had people ask, how do we support you guys? cancel your streaming platforms. No, I'm just kidding. Because, obviously we rely on that for what we do to get the exposure, but there's been this increasing corporate greed that's exacerbated in every industry, exacerbated by the stockholders wanting their bottom line to keep improving, and so that their stock portfolio keeps becoming more valuable. And I think we all understand and appreciate that. But there's a point at which it seems as though compassion and concern for the individuals upon whose backs one is making those profits get sort of, I don't know, driven under the tires. And I think that those of us who have been fortunate enough to work and people are, as a result, curious to hear what we have to say, need to speak on behalf of everybody in the union, because, there's some people that make an extraordinary amount of money that are actors, that are stars, huge stars. And then there's those who don't make enough to get medical coverage. And the union spans the whole thing. And I think a lot of people associate actors' wealth with those stars that they may read numbers about, and then just think, actors have it easy. But I think it's good to talk about some of the nitty-gritty things that have changed just in the time that we've been in the business, because it's been dramatic.
I spent some time this weekend listening to some podcasts. There's a Deadline podcast, and they've been talking about the Writers Guild strike, and then they discussed the actor strikes that started on this is Sunday, started on the 14th, and then they interviewed some experts from Wall Street. So I'm certainly not an expert. I can only speak from my own experience, and I came away from it. I literally had tears listening to the stories and what's really the dynamics of what's going on between the corporate world. And the one gentleman actually said something that really resonated with me. He said, it's like us artists are trying to save this industry from the people who own it. And the people who own it now, and it's happening, corporations came in many, many years ago, Sony and such, and Universal and NBC and all that.
Sony used to say MGM.
Yeah.
Remember that? I remember when they took down the MGM and put up Sony, and it was like,
right.
No.
So but Time Warner, those companies came in years and years ago. And, when you think of the 70s, when Robert Evans was the head of Paramount Studios, that was kind of the last time it really was there. Although it was still it still was owned by a bigger
Western
company, Gulf Western, right?
Yeah.
So it's always been a business, but there was still somewhat a bit more autonomy in artists just creating their things, because we're so passionate about what we do. We just want to get it made and put it out there, and we still think of it as art. And I think with the advent of these tech companies and the Amazons and the Netflix and everything that certainly got accelerated during COVID, that now we're in a deep restructuring of the industry, and we're trying to, from my experience, always catch up to the technology. The technology always surpasses our contracts. And you think back to the time when we just were plugging along with 3 networks, and you went to the movies and you watched a few television shows, and then all of a sudden it became that you're going to rent movies and DVDs, and we had to fight for residuals for that kind of thing as well. So, but the companies always have a head start, because they don't have to give you anything that hasn't set a precedent.
A wild one, you just went straight to DVDs, but there was actually a huge sort of tectonic shift when we went from VHS videotape to DVDs. And the rumor has it that there was a gentleman that was negotiating, the lawyer that was representing SAG at that time, that deal went through, determined that a different payment should be made for this type of plastic versus that type of plastic. That VHS, okay, you got X amount for every sale. There's a piece of pie. There's X number of actors in a thing, and this is how much the actors get percentage-wise in general, and the actors get, for their time in a big film. depending on the number of people that were in it, they get some percentage of that. Mm-hmm. When the videotape is sold, and it may be just pennies or dollars or whatever, but every sale of videotape and every rental of videotape would be calculated in some way. And we would make good residuals for movies that did really well. And in general, residuals, I think everybody knows, are the things that actors rely upon to create some kind of economic stability in a life that is entirely dependent upon the merciless vicissitudes of fate, where you have no way of predicting what is going to happen next. And so it created a little bit of flow. If you'd been working, you were going to get paid for the shows that reran on television and for the movies that did well in the theaters and that rented well at the video stores. But the guy that represented SAG decided that we shouldn't get as much for the DVD. And in fact, it was a huge reduction when it went from VHS to DVD. And this has been my understanding by people that have really worked involved with this negotiation at the time, that it was discovered that the lawyer that represented SAG was later to become one of the part owners of Netflix. And Netflix was the one that sent out the little red envelopes with the DVDs in it. And they shut down all the video stores across the country, essentially, in the wake of that transition.
Now, I think you told me that, and you know, there's so much going on behind the scenes that feels so big and so complicated, and you know, this whole idea of streaming, and like I said, I think COVID really accelerated it because we were at home, and all of a sudden we had a demand for new content, and that model of Netflix, you had all of these other, you know, the and all those other companies, or maybe I shouldn't even be saying that. I'm sorry. Let's bleep that one, Parker, my editor. But all these PTP companies that they all of a sudden they're chasing that model, and we produce so much content that there was one expert on this podcast that was saying that if we just produce less content, there would be some money left over for the writers and the actors and such.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming how much content is being produced these days. Like all of these streaming platforms like Netflix and Prime are now making their own shows instead of just putting on reruns and everything. And it's overwhelming the amount of just new things there are coming out.
Right.
And overwhelming to the viewers to have to keep, that show's on this platform or that platform, so I guess I have to order that now too, and so they keep paying more and more and more money. We all do, because we want to stay current, even if we're not like avid TV watchers. We want to be able to watch a show that we might want to be involved in or see what somebody's done before, and in order to stay current in general, you almost have to stream everything, so you're spending a fortune on this stuff as actors, as well as the fan base and the audience in general.
And then recently, Netflix has started, I don't know if I can say Netflix, has started cracking down and is saying you can't have multiple households. I've had people, like friends who don't live in the state anymore where their parents are, and they've been kicked off their Netflix account because Netflix has said, you're not in the same household as this person. You can't watch anymore. You're not allowed to be in different places anymore. I
kind of get that one, just because so many people could basically cheat the system and get away. You gotta expect to pay something for everything in life, and I don't know that it's those kids got to stop freeloading on their parents. I'm not saying your generation.
Watch who you're talking to.
I'm kidding.
My mom pays my phone bill.
I do?
You're good with insurance for 3 more years.
I'm staying on health insurance until I get kicked off. If you're going to
fuck yourself up, now is the time.
I don't know if I'm going to have health insurance next year. You have to make a certain amount, and that's the other thing. Our residual, it's really, really complicated because there's, and to the Netflix thing, I was listening to these Wall Street experts, and they were saying that Netflix it's what do they call it? Predatory pricing. They literally are underpriced for the product that they're putting out there, and so all these other streaming platforms are trying to keep up. And it's the same thing as like Amazon itself puts on, they price products at very, very low for competitiveness.
Well, it's tricky because now they don't have the old paradigms they used to have in terms of tracking TV ratings and or syndication. Those old paradigms are now completely lost. And in that, there was a certain element of uncertainty on the network studios, producers to, figure out how much they're spending and how much they're getting back. And some smaller independent film producers, I could feel their pain because I, first of all, have always loved going back and forth between doing things that are big pop culture events and things that are obscure art independent film events. And so I've been a big fan of those people that were willing to risk their hard-earned dollars to make an independent film that didn't have some huge corporate studio network support in order to finance it and have it distributed. It was a big gamble. And it's a gamble for art on the part of producers as well as actors, writers, and directors to get a hold of a script that's creative enough to inspire you to do it, despite the fact that you're not going to make the money you would on something else. And the producers are in that boat too, and they've got to we want them to be able to make their money back. And some of the structures, the residual structures were, from my understanding, unfairly inclined towards actors quite a while ago now, because we've lost in several negotiations any strength that we had. But before, independent film producers were apparently having to pay residuals out before they got their money back, if that's something viewed. And so that's tricky because you want to feel like, well, make your money back, and then we all agreed to do this for X amount of money. But now that you've made your money back, all the money now has to be shared in terms of residuals and all the rest of it. It's complicated. I don't know if this is interesting to people.
Well, it's a really complicated thing because I think people don't understand the residual. So back in the days of in the 70s and 80s and such, when there was a network television show, they would do 13 episodes. Let's say it was one. Okay, I'm not supposed to mention it. Sorry.
Or 22 episodes.
So, they would do 13 and then repeat them over the summertime, and you got paid exactly the same amount. That first time it's repeated in primetime television, you got paid exactly the same that you made the first time. And we get paid per episode. So you ended up getting, more than 22 episodes. But then the model turned to 22 episodes or sometimes 24
and then you
or
would
27.
Get half.
And then the first time it airs in primetime repeat, did they cut it to half? Is that what it was?
Oh, definitely half, if not less than half.
So then if it ever repeated throughout the summer or such, that's when you would make really good residuals. But then they stopped doing that because we were doing so many episodes, they stopped repeating during the summer at some point. A goal for a television show it used to be 100 episodes on a network. And then once it moved into true syndication, that's where you really made your money. The problem with something like a Netflix or an Amazon is they're produced by those shows and they're on those platforms in perpetuity. They're never going to move. So that would be if it moved or got licensed to somebody else, that's where you would make a residual. But Netflix has been doing this for a long time, not really paying. They're paying their own version of residuals. And so they're trying to come up with, from what I understand, a success-based residual, which would mean based on the success of a show on Netflix and how many people are watching, who's watching and all that. This has been one of the things that they are slamming the door on because it would force them to open their books and be transparent. And now they don't ever want to do that because they don't want to show anybody how much they're making. But if Netflix is going to start having advertisers, you've got to be able to show advertisers what the numbers are. So it's highly, highly complicated. And I think ultimately, if we don't fight for for instance, the last time we were on strike together, 60 years ago, it was to get health and pension and health and pension and residuals, because we didn't have that. And it's a scary thought to think that ultimately their bottom line is what you said, the valuation on Wall Street and their profits. And they want to continue this business and do it for as little money as possible. And I don't know, CG, your generation, it'll be interesting. We're fighting for your generation, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
I feel like.
because we were just able to sort of, I think in the 60s, up until the 60s, there were a lot of people that were taken advantage of, just like we all know people in the music industry were.
Mm-hmm.
But then somewhere in the 70s, some litigation took place and changes were made so that people could get a fair share of what they're playing it again, and they're getting all the same advertising money to play it again.
Mm-hmm.
Then they've got to pay it again for those who were involved in making it.
Right.
And on one scale or another, and they sort of have drifted away from that as it's gotten harder and harder to track. They've taken advantage of the obscuring
Mm-hmm.
factors and just decided to sort of put the kibosh on more and more shows. Suddenly it's like, oh, in the fine print, we're basically not going to be paying anything in the way of the first 12 reruns of the show, nothing. And then
Right.
maybe down the line, after it's gone down to next to nothing. And I've gotten a couple of checks for $0 in the past month.
Or
And
minus
it's like,
one, because
are
they
you
need
going to start taking money away now? I mean,
well, and the other thing is that when you think about that model, if we were going the show that you and I worked on in Toronto, that sometimes we were doing 24 episodes, or but then nowadays you think about writers and actors, they're doing sometimes 8 episodes or 10 episodes. So we all get paid per episode.
And they'll be committed. They can't do anything else. They're not being set free.
Yeah. And you can't, and it's exclusive. So when you think about writers who are a lot more writers, a higher percentage of writers are getting just barely scale. It used to be like 20, now it's 50%. And also the cost of production has doubled in the past 15 years, but the payment scale hasn't doubled. So you're asking writers to work the same amount of time, maybe 10 months on a show for only 10 episodes when they were getting 22 before. That needs to change. And actors as well. So those are the big things that are happening, but also the AI it's been here and it's here and it's you kind of think of it as being so in the future, but it's here.
It's like one of my biggest fears.
What?
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it should be. I worked on a movie over 33, I guess, years ago now, almost 33, that foretold the tale of the danger of AI.
There's been so many films and TV that have warned us
to tear us apart. Yeah, there've been so many.
We haven't listened to the warnings.
Right.
And I even remember commercials. Like I did a film with, and I nobody will be able to track down probably on the basis of this information the name of the thing, but it was a script. A friend who became a friend at this point posted online and was doing a GoFundMe, like Kickstarter funding thing, based on, here, read the script. You want to see this get made? Help it get made. And the Bogart Foundation saw it, read it. It was a contemporary noir. And they went, yeah, this is exactly what we want to do. Let's do this. And they had accrued somebody, even though the budget was very modest and they'd already started raising some money on Kickstarter, they were only asking for a small amount. They go, no, take the whole amount. We can afford that. Make a better movie, include the part that other people have already given you some money towards. And we also have favors that we can throw at this in terms of where we can shoot, because a lot of people during this one little window of time, you might remember, I don't know if CG's old enough, but they were using Bogart's likeness and Marilyn Monroe's likeness on TV commercials. And they'd figure out a way to sort of animate them and take their vocal, whatever it was. It wasn't convincing. It was clearly a commercial ripping their personas off, but it got shut down pretty quickly. And it was just a little window of time when they were trying that out. And back then, because I think it was like the 90s, they thought That's creepy. They're going to be able to do that to any. And every time I ever got scanned for a show,
Yeah.
you've been scanned, I'm sure.
I haven't.
CG, have you been scanned?
No, I was just about to say, I was watching a television show, and it's a cartoon about an actor, and he's doing this big movie, but he's a liability because he drinks, does drugs. He's just like all over the place. And they scan his head, and he ends up going off the rails, and he finds out that the movie that was made, he's not actually in a single scene of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a scan of him.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is nuts.
So
that actually happened? Or is
I
that
don't know.
what
The
show
television
was about?
show is apparently based on a real actor's life.
Huh.
So I think it did happen.
So,
but it's like loosely based on his life.
So our lead negotiator.
I'll tell you the name of it later.
our lead negotiator on SAG. I was listening to an interview with him yesterday, talking about the fact that we're not trying to stop AI, or at least SAG in general. And I say we, that they're really they want to go. They want to embrace it and be progressive and futuristic and all that. But what I guess they had proposed was, for instance, using a background player comes in, they're going to scan them, and then they get that identity for $100 for the day. They get it forever.
In perpetuity.
In perpetuity.
Yeah, that's just insane. And that's for background actors.
That's for background actors. And it's already happened.
You're wiping out a lot of people's income. The minute you do that, you're wiping out.
Right.
And I'm sorry, we have to do enough imagining as it is when you're an actor to have to imagine, a scene that would just like in a restaurant where different people are sitting at different tables eating and stuff. It helps to have background, especially good background that really knows how to just be real and simple and quiet in the moment and pantomime. And it was fascinating just to fill in a loop group you do maybe 6 different passes on a crowd scene. There's 5 or 6 of you, and you're calling out, I got that guy. I got that. Okay. And then you follow these people in the background and you ad lib, but you have to give ND, improvisation, nondescript language. Like there were hot words that were on a list that you couldn't ever improvise. Never say the word mother. Never say the word blood. It'll pop out.
I've never heard of that.
Being a young actor, like being open to all kinds of CG's taking, I think I told you, classes at Second City. She's doing improv, but being open to things like that, those kinds of experience. Loop groups can be highly fun and satisfying, and just being behind, you're in post at that point.
And they forever get you over the anxiety and trepidation about having to do ADR. Having to loop your performance because a plane went overhead or a train went through or the sound got muffled because of your clothing or whatever. We have to do a lot of replacement dialogue. Right. And I've always looked forward to it ever since I did a loop group, because I got, wow, you can just keep making it better every time you. Yeah. And because I never like to look at the monitor. I don't like to get outside of it. When I'm in it, I like to stay in it. It's just my joy. It's not necessarily good advice for anyone else. And then I really enjoy I don't like to see a rough cut. I like to see it when they've done the color correcting and they've put the score in, and it's like Christmas. You open it all at once. And being on the outside in these little glimpses through ADR, the only times I go, oh, well, now that I'm outside of it, I actually see that this would work better than what I did on the day. More often than not, the directors go, just do as much as you can, just match, because I love what you did here, and I just want to see that again. And I go, yep, I think I might have a better idea. and it's really fun being outside of it in that phase and looking at how a different vocal quality, different inflection, a different emotion can suddenly connect, and you just learn how to get really good at making the lip sync work.
Yeah, that's a skill. It definitely, I'm always very happy. I don't know. I've been on shows where my goal is to make sure I never have to do the ADR. That's kind of been my thing. And so
I've gone with you to ADR when I was little. I would come with you and I'd sit in the sound booth.
Sometimes you can't avoid it.
While you're doing ADR. I have so many memories of that.
Do you? Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you remember or what you don't because, we were all in Toronto together and that's a good segue. We
Doing a show that we won't name.
but was I remember, do you remember the first time I just called you and said, we're going to my friend's restaurant, Harbor 60. CG, you've been to Harbor 60?
Yep.
In Toronto.
Pop Rocks.
Yeah. Yeah. Pop Rocks.
Yes.
And we took everyone to that restaurant and it was highly expensive. And we had, oh my gosh, it was so much fun. I mean, there's something about location that you and I have had multiple conversations about because you're literally just surviving. And I was flying back and forth and you brought your whole family. And also,
I didn't abandon my child.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just kidding. I know you guys are joking. Oh, ow.
You're going to strike a nerve there, Xander.
I want to just keep this interesting for the audience.
We might as well get to the nitty gritty considering we can't talk about the TV.
No, but this is the emotional trauma that this is what actors go through because there have been plenty of times I've had to do shows away and it is literally like driving a knife in your heart. Like I did a show in Shreveport and I didn't get to bring my family because they weren't going to relocate to that shithole. I'm kidding, Shreveport. I'm kidding. You're a great town. I
don't even know where that is.
But Toronto, it was just good fortune that Sarah was so pregnant and she already had a sequel or two to do that was set up. So she didn't have to look for work.
Right.
It was going to be nursing.
It was one of those big vampire things.
Something along that line. We can say spy genre, vampire genre. We can give people hints.
Vampire werewolf argument.
The werewolf
Sarah
thing
Clarke,
for me came right after the spy thing. But I remember saying to her, because I wasn't going to take because she was having a baby and beep.
We'll bleep it.
No, I wasn't going to take it. That doesn't say that I did.
No,
I'm not even talking about that. I don't know. I brought that up. Anyway, the show I was talking about, which I won't name, is the one that I didn't know if I was going to do or not. And,
it was hard to get you on, I remember.
Yeah, and then they made suddenly a fair offer and a straight offer, and I said, "Okay, Sarah, Toronto," and she was like, "Why wouldn't we?" I was like, "But you're going to move there, and stay there?" Because we hadn't been doing shows. Once we had our first child, we weren't going to do a show that would break up the family, and that's hard to do because that's also in the midst of, they used to shoot 80% of all television and movies in Los Angeles. And around 2008, it had shifted to about 20% shot in Los Angeles and about 80% elsewhere.
It's probably less now.
Because of tax incentives, now even less. That was 2008. And so it was a gradual and, if not sudden, migration away from Los Angeles because the big, 300-pound gorilla in the economy of California is not show business. It turns out it's Silicon Valley, and it didn't behoove them to provide tax incentives. One time traveling with the big network producer explaining to me why don't we have tax incentives for film in LA? In California.
Right. We usually ask people what your favorite film is right now, and so we can't do that. But I'm just asking, like, what do you think? Favorite films and TV, what's that meaning yet for you?
You know, it's funny because I go back to a lot of classics. I am a huge film noir fan. Like I will watch those movies repeatedly because it's just there's some magic they captured in a bottle at that point. It's almost like, for me, like the Impressionists in France in the 1920s. What the hell happened that they were all just sort of just getting it together. And to me, I feel that way about the early black and white Gothic horror films. And I feel that way about the 40s film noir films and about 60s foreign films. Bergman and Fellini and Truffaut. And there was just pure genius that was happening. And I felt like they were cross-pollinating this and certain mastery that, I don't think any level of, digital mastery can ever replace. And maybe that's putting another bow on the conversation about where AI and different things enter in. That, to me, the part of what made that movie that you referenced, the Arnold Schwarzenegger one of his films, remain futuristic and feel so powerful at the beginning of digital wizardry, was because so much of it was done with practical application. Like, I actually had to practice sword swallowing for 2 weeks before doing that scene. They did have a mold at the back of my head and puppeteers that were down below frame pulling pulleys that would make this retract and that come out to make it look as though there was just so much involved.
It gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, it was ingenious, and they were taking all of technology, but they were just using also all of the magic of practical stagecraft and putting them together. And I feel like, we'll keep moving forward, and there'll still be, waves of genius, and maybe they'll make the most brilliant films with pure AI down the line. Who knows? But there's something about humanity and storytelling and truth, and just like I was saying, real connection, real listening between actors in the moment that no robots and no digital mastery can ever. I feel it when I'm watching a movie, and I can see that those aren't real extras, that's just a digital crowd. Mm-hmm. And I feel cheated on some level. And I think the real magic would be, at this point, to get away from. I'd like to see more paintings and backdrops and some of the stuff that they did out of pure invention back then, because they weren't being lazy. They didn't just click in a few things.
Like in
yeah, that's right. There was a wizarding movie that did that once. A lot of that director Hitchcock uses unbelievable. If you look at them repeatedly, that answers. He's another person I'll go to again and again. And you see, wow, that was all a backdrop, and they created from daylight.
They would paint, paint, and then like a painting this big on glass,
and then like
would
little
become
pinholes that bring, and they show lights coming through as it gets darker. So you think that. But if you look closely, that's also part of this.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And here in Maine, we got a barn. We want to get some of my painter friends. We want to do some expressionistic films that work with backdrop paintings, and as well as maybe 4-screen LED projection. But I like the combination. And I to this day, I like to see the newest things that are being made. But I do always like to go back to, it's like reading classic literature.
We are going into the future, and I think we're embracing it. So I think we have a bit of a fight. But one last question before we go. If you could talk to your young self, what would you tell him?
Oh, just go for it. Which I did do.
You did.
But, don't be afraid to carve your own path out, because, at the end of the day, there's this uncertainty and there's this feeling that if you don't go for it, you never have the opportunities. And one of the things that I've found is that I feel really fortunate. I feel really grateful and grateful to the friends that I've made, and feel like we'll always be friends, and somebody that I'm so excited to lure out to get off the grid a little bit and think outside the box and find new ways of telling stories. And I guess the thing I'm still telling my younger self, who's going to be a director when he grows up, is hang in there and don't lose sight of your big dreams, because it's easy. The business will absorb you, whatever level you allow it to. So that's why I think I just say keep at it. Take
action. Never stop taking action, right?
Yeah, except in strikes when we have to not act. No action.
Well, Xander, thank you so much for being here. I mean, I went back and forth about postponing, but I think you were the one person that we could literally have a conversation without breaking the rules and still, but celebrate the artistry and ourselves and talk about this. And
I think we pulled it off. I mean, CG was here to catch us the minute we strayed.
Yeah. I was the title police.
Yeah.
This was a very informative conversation too. I mean, for anyone who's interested in getting into acting, I think you guys gave a lot of super, super helpful knowledge that we probably wouldn't have discussed if this strike wasn't happening.
I think it's a wonderful experiment. So listeners, I'll let you know what's going on in the future. If we have to go on pause, I'm not sure yet, or if I can continue down this road with some other people that worked on that Toronto show I had lined up. But, it's cool. It's nice to be able to reminisce, and we will be coming to Maine. I think we need to. Xander keeps inviting us.
Yeah, and tell the mister that the river is twice its normal size.
Oh, Adam.
and there is white water to be rafted at, and just all you have to do is go to Vermont.
You're invited to come. Thanks. He's right.
We have a pretty good canoe.
A canoe. We're on a canoe. Give Rowan and Owen our best, and give a hug to Sarah. And we hope to see you in person again soon. And thank you for listening, everyone, to the Bitchin' Biz with Xander Berkeley. Go look at that IMDb or Wikipedia.
Yeah.
See if you can figure out what we were talking about. Make a little game out of it. Maybe a drinking game. Just don't mention it to me.
Okay, Xander.
Great to see you guys. Lots of love. Talk soon.
Thank you so much. Bye. My sweet CG. Well, we got through that last one. Really interesting experiment to be able to talk about art and acting and why we do this without actually naming the shows that we're in.
Very interesting, informative conversation with Xander. I was a little bit policing both of them, slipping the titles of some things, but no, overall it was a great conversation. I enjoyed it for sure.
So to hear more of our conversation with Xander, please head over to our Patreon, Bye Bitches. It is the support over there that keeps us coming back here. And well, I think that's it. Well, no, what am I talking about? You can follow me at the Melinda Clarke on Instagram and TikTok. And CG, what is your handle, honey?
I am CGMIR on Instagram and TikTok.
And I forgot to ask Xander, but I know Xander. He's at Xander Original on Instagram.
And also follow the Bye Bitches podcast on Instagram to keep up with all of our new episodes. And we'll give some updates as to what's happening with the strike. And just to stay up on everything. Bye Bitches.
Thank you all again for your support. And we'll see ya. Bye, bitches.
Like and follow. Bye.
Bye.